We have gone through a period where technology has accelerated in the fintech space quite aggressively. And so you have, a situation where an Islamic bank may take 2 weeks to open a bank account and Revolut is doing it in 30 seconds. There is still the perception that Islamic finance or Islamic banks offer a product simply by replacing the word interest with profit and charging us more for it. And unfortunately, we need to, that's not the case, and we need to improve the education and understanding of what actually it is the simplest and unfortunately the only one that the FCA, the regulator, and HMRC will accommodate a non-banking institution to utilize.
Right.
And so when we first presented, we were looking at progressing with a Najara-based offering, which is a finance lease. But we couldn't do that because the FCA were not very accommodating in that space, nor was HMRC.
Assalamu alaikum, Youness. Thank you so much for joining me here. You're one of the co-founders of Nesta, which is I guess a peer-to-peer platform to raise investment for property, real estate in a Shariah compliant way. And a very impressive stat of over the last 3 years that you've been around, you've raised about 35 million from ordinary individuals in property. So first of all, Jazakallah khair for coming here today. Tell us a little bit more about firstly what Nesta is.
So Nesta is an online investment platform that offers customers the ability to source real estate finance, so for the acquisition of property. So if you're an SME and you acquire property to either invest in long term, to refurbish, to then flip, we are able to provide financing that supports that acquisition. And we do so with a bridge product or a refurbishment product, or in some cases a buy-to-let product. The other side of the business, the other side of the business is an investment platform, which provides the funding for those financing. And so there, our customers are day-to-day investors that are looking to invest in secured real estate and earn a fixed return over a period of time.
Yes, so, just to unpack that a little bit more. So you have a platform in the middle. You are providing finance for people in the property investment development space, not somebody purchasing a home for themselves.
Correct.
And that finance is then raised not from traditional banks, interest-based lending. It's from the crowd, i.e. ordinary individuals that want to invest in that particular investment.
Absolutely right. And so you're right. We're very proud of our stat also in terms of our growth over the last 3 years since launching, and completing 35 million pounds worth of transactions. We've completed around 50 or 52, alhamdulillah. Has been a great achievement for us, and to do so without accessing any institutional funding, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but is quite important, and it's a statement.
Yes. So let's look at the one aspect of the business first, the providing of the funds. So you mentioned like a bridge, a development finance, and buy-to-let. And often people associate those with a traditional bank or bridging lender that's going to be interest-based. So how is this different from that?
So we categorize those financings in that way to allow investors to align how and where their funds are going to be deployed. And so the way we present opportunities, we present them as investment opportunities for individuals to consider and to then make a decision to invest in. The categorization that we've chosen just helps align the mindset. So, someone who is looking at a bridge opportunity to invest in is doing so knowing that this is going to be a short-term investment for a period of 9 to 12 months, and the likelihood is that the strategy of this project will be to acquire, do something with the property, and then sell it on.
Yes.
And similarly with a development or refurbishment facility, there will be that kind of alignment. So those are the categorizations that we've used to align our investors' ability to determine which investments they'd be interested in.
And then with regards to this, how is it different from, say, ordinary finance that people would tap into?
There's an argument here for substance and form. So fundamentally, there is a investment into a project here with Nesta that aligns similarly to a financing, and so this is fundamentally a debt-based investment, and that's the structure by which our investors are investing into these projects. That is very similar to other type of financing models in the conventional space.
Yes.
Be it loans or otherwise. The difference with how we've positioned our business and the comfort that we've taken, we can come on to some of the Islamic structures later on, but fundamentally it's the substance of the transaction between our investor and our borrower, and that is that our borrower is seeking funds to support with a project, and our investor has funds that that they would like to invest into that project. The form of the documentation that we've used that is Shariah compliant to accommodate that facilitates the transaction. But we take on board the fact that there is an individual that is looking to invest into a project for a return, and that's the basis or the foundation of the Nesta transaction.
So rather than it coming from a bank which is interest based, effectively the investors that are putting money into the project, they're getting a slice of the profit, however that's been agreed or structured.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
absolutely.
In this type of arrangement, you think, okay, that makes sense. I understand that. I can understand, how that would be seen as Shariah compliant because you're sharing profit on a kind of very high level. Why isn't there lots and lots of these organisations that already exist? Why don't they exist?
Yeah, the barrier to entry, unfortunately, is extremely high.
Yes.
We launched 3 years ago. We started this business 5 years ago. It took us 2 years to secure the FCA authorization, to secure the changes that we needed with HMRC to accommodate our business on the basis that Nesta is not a financial institution, and a historical, the historical Islamic products laws that don't apply to non-banking institutions. We needed them to, and so many of the changes that were required came from our lobbying in the recent years. So alhamdulillah, we made that change, and also then accommodated further changes such that we are able to offer an ISA, an innovative finance ISA. So that also is quite an important shift for us. So we've been able to achieve some kind of very positive, innovative steps forward. However, the barrier to entry still remains quite high, and so I would, and I say this very often, both within the industry kind of roundtables and more openly, I would love there to be many more Nestas offering products and solutions similar to ours, different in any way. I think the industry requires continued innovation and more players to support the demand that is extremely visible by us at least,
Often the perception is you need a large amount of money to be able to get involved in property. Although that can be the case, it doesn't necessarily have to be. There are many, many different ways that you can make money from property. The biggest challenge is, though, that many of them can't be done in a Sharia compliant way. There are, however, still some strategies and techniques that can be used to make significant profits from property. I've put together a short training for you that explains how you can make money from property in a halal and Sharia compliant way. Head over to the link, which is sajhussain.com/halal, and you can get the free training there. Now let's jump back to the podcast. Yes. So let's talk about the Islamic finance side of it and the umbrella it sits under. So we're in a country with a fairly sizable Muslim population and growing as well. So the assumption would be there must be huge demand for this type of investment, this type of funding, yet there aren't lots of providers. There was, back in the day, there was the HSBC and Lloyds Bank had variations of these type of products. And then we thought we were in this kind of growth sector of Islamic finance products. But it kind of plateaued and almost started to drop off.
Yeah, I think it did drop off. I think we had a great period in the early 2000s where we had some fantastic figureheads in the Islamic finance community that were leading on different angles. Alhamdulillah, one of those, Mohammed Pracha, is my co-founder. There are others like Haris Irfan, who led through Deutsche Bank and introduced some products that I think he describes in one of his podcasts as a black box, but it created some great solutions. But those are the early 2000s.
Yes.
And that was when there was law introduced in the UK that accommodated Islamic finance.
The double
banks.
stamp duty.
Yeah, correct. After that, there was growth. Yeah, there was growth, and there were new entrants, but it stagnated, and the service delivery for some of those banks at a retail level wasn't great,
Yes.
and I'm not talking down any player. This is just what's been in the public domain, and so I think the community has experienced some service that has been below standard, and then that starts to raise question. And unfortunately, if you have others, and we have gone through a period where technology has accelerated in the fintech space.
Yes.
Quite aggressively. And so you have, a situation where an Islamic bank may take 2 weeks to open a bank account, and Revolut is doing it in 30 seconds.
Yes.
And so, what the question is always why. So, within the community, we're always seen to be forced to take a lower quality product at a higher price.
Yes.
that takes slower to access. And so we've tried with Nesta, as have others, mashallah, the likes of FIDA, who are doing incredible work. And there are many others that are trying to penetrate the space with a really good, powerful product that is delivering at a high quality and a high standard. We need more of those.
Yes.
Yeah, we need more of those.
So with the perception in the marketplace of these type of products, do you feel there is a healthy appetite for them, or is there some resistance towards how things are labeled, and is it really interest free, some of these products, or they're just positioned in a different way? I try to have lots of conversation with people, and I have very interesting views.
Yeah, I hear some interesting views too, Saj. Yeah. I would say that there remains a need to educate the community. Yeah, I say that because there is still the perception that Islamic finance or Islamic banks offer a product simply by replacing the word interest with profit and charging us more for it. and unfortunately, we need to, that's not the case, and we need to improve the education and understanding of what actually transpires behind some of those legal contracts. It took us at Nesta 12 months to build the contracts that we currently have operating, and to make them in a form that is both Shariah compliant, FCA compliant, and compliant from a tax perspective. That's not simply replacing the word,
Yes.
And we also have tried and continue to try and will, inshallah, achieve some further innovation and focusing on other types of products like ijara and musharaka. These products which are effectively variations of what are, a finance lease or a profit sharing contract. And so, we're still on a journey. But to come back to your question, there is still a negative perception of Islamic finance in the market and within the community, and we're working very hard to try and shift that. And we can do that by, speaking to the fact that we're trying, and there's, Islamic finance does X, Y, and Z, or we could do that by showing what our product does and support others that are doing the same. And we've chosen to do that. We've chosen to go out and actually show. So hopefully Nesta is in that space that delivers for the community. And if it does, then then we're in a good space.
Tell us more about how the current model and the way it works is Shariah compliant. What is the structure behind how it works?
So we currently use a commodity murabaha structure.
Just explain that for somebody might not be familiar with the terms.
Yeah, sure. So a commodity murabaha structure is effectively a cost plus model. So it's a financing arrangement that creates a debt obligation through the sale of commodities. And so it is the simplest Shariah compliant structures that an Islamic institution can use to create that debt obligation. It is the simplest and unfortunately the only one that the FCA, the regulator, and HMRC will accommodate a non-banking institution to utilize.
Right.
And so when we first presented, we were looking at progressing with a Ijara-based offering, which is a finance lease. But we couldn't do that because the FCA were not very accommodating in that space, nor was HMRC, because we would have lost the double stamp relief. And so the commodity murabaha, or the cost plus, was the only structure that allowed that was permissible across regulation and tax. However, from our perspective, we still took comfort from the commodity murabaha structure on the basis that the commodity murabaha in this instance is between two individuals, and two individuals whose intentions are clear. And what I mean by that is, going back to the point I made earlier, we have one individual who requires funding for a project, for a specific purpose, and we have another individual who has funds that is willing to invest in that project for a specific purpose, that purpose being to earn a return, and will do so based on the understanding of the risks and rewards associated with that investment. The return is agreed, and that is done through the platform. And so the murabaha documents that arrangement. Now, it documents it by creating a debt obligation, and creates the obligation to pay a return. However, there is still an element there of intent, and so we're continuing to trying to develop that that side of the business, that element of the transaction, being the intention, to get closer to where we'd like to be, where it comes to building on the real economy based Islamic finance, which I think is, of the future.
Yes. So right now it's around real estate, around property.
Yeah.
And do you think there's possibilities to grow this into other areas, business, financing, acquisitions, stock, growth of businesses?
Absolutely. So we're already looking as a business to support business finance. We're seeing that already. That was probably within the first year of launching Nesta. More recently, we've been asked to facilitate some commodity trading, and that's quite an interesting space. And so for us, expansion for Nesta is both from the perspective of providing more products or service, but also on the other side, potentially looking at expansion into other jurisdictions.
Yes.
And both of those areas are in live conversation within our executive committee.
So there's other opportunities globally for a model like this. How progressed do you think we are in this country? How advanced when it comes to Islamic finance? Do you think it's an environment that's encouraging the growth of this type of business, or do you think it's suppressive in?
I think we are advanced because we have some very strong tech people. So from a technological perspective,
Yes.
we are quite advanced. I say that hesitating because there are some players in globally that are extremely accelerated, and have some very strong incubators. However, we do have a strong tech foundation. From an Islamic perspective, I think we still have some work to do. I think we still have a lot of work to do. Like I said, there are some figureheads in the Islamic finance community that are still, trying to come together, and there are some round tables being formed, and mashallah, some new innovative business ideas coming to light, and that's fantastic, seeing that. But there's still a lot more to do, and the more we do, the more we push against government and lobby for changes, the more we'll be able to achieve. But there, even for us at Nesta, we're still trying to move the dial.
Yes. And mashallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you in terms of what you're trying to do in this space. And you mentioned getting a couple of laws changed just with the HMRC. Tell us a little bit more about that. Because this is what facilitates and creates a path for other people to want to follow as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2003, 2004, there was a law that was introduced that basically stated, if you are a deposit-taking institution, if you are a UK regulated bank, if you are an international bank or international financial institution, you will benefit from the following reliefs or changes to how transactions will be accommodated, and those transactions effectively describe the different Islamic structures, Islamic financing structures that a bank may use. Commodity murabaha was one of them, and basically it said, because you're trading in metals to create a debt obligation, well, that debt obligation mirrors what a conventional loan and interest arrangement would be. And as such, for tax purposes, this commodity murabaha should be treated as loan and interest when it comes to taxation. If you are not a financial institution, you would not be able to benefit from that. And so I'll come back to that. There are others. There were other transactions or structures that were described in that statute also, one of those being the ijara. So if you were a financial institution, if you're an Islamic bank providing a ijara-based financing, you would not be charged double stamp duty on buying the property and then selling it on a finance lease. You had that relief. Now, we went to HMRC and government and said, look, although we are not a bank, regulated as a bank, and we are not an international financial institution, what we are is regulated by the FCA to provide these type of financing arrangements to customers. And at the moment, if we did so, the tax liability for our borrowers will be punitive, based on the fact that they would have to treat the buying and selling of commodities that creates the obligation in a way that is punitive, and they lose the relief. And similarly for our customers that are investing, the way they would treat the income, again, it would be punitive, because they won't be able to get any interest relief. And so we presented that position and said, look, we're coming to you as a regulated business. We need this change in law so that we can operate. Now, we pushed and said we also want the ijara benefit, but they were very restrictive, and they just umbrellaed the commodity murabaha and said, we'll give you this.
Right.
You can operate in this space. So that was the first thing that we did. The second thing was what we pushed in the following year. We pushed that on the basis that the commodity murabaha was equivalent to an interest, a conventional interest model, our investors that were investing should also benefit from the ISA in respect of their income that they're earning. And so we pushed and lobbied, and that was also accommodated. So alhamdulillah, Nesta is but a tadpole in a very big ocean, yet we've been able to pull the ear of government to say, make two statutory changes in law that affect no other business other than us. We're the only ones that have this structure that are regulated by the FCA in that way. So alhamdulillah, and we're still pushing, we're still trying to pull on those ears. So,
but I think we're in an amazing space where in this country there are ears that will listen.
There are,
and it means that the more that we try and create and innovate in terms of what we're trying to do here, because we still have to work within a regulatory framework. It's not a case of we're starting from scratch, and that's the challenge. It's not a case of, right, this is how we should do it. Well, that's how we should do it. Within this framework, it has to work. Otherwise, we can't operate. Because they need to work within the laws of the land. And there's at least that drive there to try and push through more of this type of finance. And I think I hear this as well, that outside of in Europe, we're probably the most advanced when it comes to Islamic finance compared to many other countries within Europe. And that excites me. I think there's so much more that we can do. Tell me about your background. How did you end up here? 'Cause you started off in a very different place.
I did, yeah. I started off very much in the conventional space. I'm an accountant by trade or by training. So I was at Ernst & Young, actually straight out of college. So I didn't go to university for various reasons, but started the training program with Ernst & Young at the age of 18. Qualified as an accountant 4 years later. And did a couple of years then in transaction advisory, which is what you did. You completed audit, and then you go into transaction support, which just meant that you got closer to the deals, and that was it. I got my kind of taste of blood, and jumped out of accountancy and went into banking. And I, at the time, joined Anglo-Irish Bank, which is one of Europe's leading real estate banks, and really cut my teeth there, looking after some of the largest UK developers, mainly for me around Canary Wharf. So many of the high-rise towers in Canary Wharf I funded. But of course, credit crunch happened, and I then moved into some debt advisory, helping people that I had really close relationships with for a few years, having worked with them, who are now struggling to stay afloat, and had. As a young man in my late 20s, had people in their late 50s, crying, and it was a very, very difficult time. And for me, I think that was the moment that triggered where I said, I'm not sure this structure, the banking system works. It's not supposed to be like this.
Yes.
And so, subhanAllah, I got
when you see the challenges around how it's gone wrong.
Yeah, when you live those. I mean, it's very, it's one thing being on the outside watching TV and, but very different standing in front of someone telling him that you can't give him any money, and you by making that statement have effectively made him bankrupt.
Yes.
Because he just doesn't have any money to pay for anything. People, when it run out, it really run out.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but that was my kind of moment, light bulb moment. And subhanAllah, I then got a call from an old friend that worked with me at Ernst & Young to join him at Gatehouse Bank, which is a young Islamic bank at the time. So I did my first stint within Islamic finance there. I had done some work, in the past, but working alongside some of the Arab banks while I was at Anglo. But this was the first real, stint, and we grew a nice little team there. I then moved into Bank ABC, which is where I really started to build a relationship with Muhammad. And Bank ABC had a bit more firepower than Gatehouse, and we were doing slightly larger loans.
Middle Eastern Saudi bank.
They're owned by Libyan Investment Authority. And they had a bit more firepower to do financings, and we had a book of maybe $1 billion by the time I left. And Muhammad Pracha, as lead counsel, looked after all of our transactions. So he'd be someone I'd be speaking to on a daily basis, and built a very good relationship. And one day, I picked up the phone to him. It was June 2018, and I said, I was on the way to work, and I said, look, are we actually doing enough, for the Muslim community? We're here purporting Islamic finance, and I'm closing a deal for £40 million for a sheikh in Qatar. Yet there's Muhammad Khan around the corner that just needs £1 million, because he wants to expand his dental practice.
Yes.
I said to Mohammed, what are we doing? Like, and I think that pulled a heartstring, and he asked what I wanted to do. By that time, having a conversation with Mohammed, you have to be prepared, right? So I was prepared, and I laid out my thoughts. And that was the start of Nesta. And, 95% of what we discussed on that phone call is what we've created. And we're continuing to create, and we'll continue pushing, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah.
Talk us through a typical deal with some numbers to help understand the Nesta model a little bit more. Because although I'm very familiar with the model and these models, there are many people watching who don't quite get their head around how does it work exactly, and some numbers might bring it to life a little bit more.
Yeah, okay. So I gave you the example of Muhammad Khan there, so let's stick with that. So Muhammad Khan owns a dental practice. His dental practice is generating £250,000 of turnover, and he's netting out £150,000 of profit a year. Next door becomes available, and he has the opportunity to buy it for £1 million. Muhammad Khan has saved up 400,000, but needs 600,000 plus a bit to cover costs.
Yes.
So he approaches Nesta and says, look, I have this ongoing business. I'm a dental practice. I'd like to buy next door. I'd like to buy it and expand into next door. It will allow me to grow my revenue from 250,000 to 350,000. And actually it will allow me to grow my profitability from 150 to 250, because I won't have to spend very much more. It's right next door. I'm just getting, this is pure growth. And I need support. To buy it, it's going to cost £1 million. I've got £300,000. Are you able to help? So in that situation, we'd say to him, look, you need to put £400,000 in. We can give you 600,000, i.e. 60% against value. So Muhammad Khan goes, finds an extra £100,000 and says, okay, right, I can do this, right? We then do the due diligence, and what in the due diligence we would look at his existing business, look at the accounts, run through the profitability, look at what he's trying to acquire. Does this make sense? Is it dilapidated? Does it need work? Does it require planning change, etc., etc.? So we'll do a whole assessment. Once we've completed that then gets presented to credit committee. Okay. And so internally we would do a third party review. So although we have one of the originators doing the work, it then gets reviewed by a third party. Once it's approved, at that point we're comfortable pushing it forward.
So the credit committee are really looking at the first bit of due diligence to say, yeah, actually we agree this makes sense.
Yeah, correct. Okay. Yeah, and only then can it be progressed on the platform. Yeah, and for investors to consider. Once it goes onto the platform, it then goes through a legal due diligence. Legal due diligence is effectively the same as any conveyancing. So you go through a lawyer to check on the title and so on. And it will also then trigger a valuation. So a third-party legal valuation will be engaged to confirm value. Let's assume, so there's no issues on the title, valuer comes back and says, yes, it's actually worth 1.05 million, so you're fine. The strategy works out and everything's fine. What we would then do is say to Mr. Khan, we'd say, look, we've completed our property due diligence. We've also completed legal due diligence. We're now ready to complete. So we're going to put this on the platform, and we'll set a completion date for 5 days. And so that's exactly what happens. And so today, for example, we have a transaction that is going live. It's going live at 1 o'clock, and it will complete on Friday. And that is just an example of
so that part you described would be very similar to how traditional financing would work from any type of lender. Tell us a little bit more about the other side, and that's different. That it's not the same as any other.
So that is replicating, as you said, the practices of a conventional financing. We do that because that is effectively, strong due diligence.
Yes.
Performing strong due diligence, and we do that on behalf of the investors. And so that then, as you say, it takes us into the space of our investors. So all of that information will be summarized and presented as an opportunity online. And it gets presented as an opportunity on the platform where investors are able to review, consider the risk rating. They're able to consider and understand the description of the property, what the strategy is, what the repayment capacity is, what the debt service capacity is. They'll be able to see the pictures of the property, the location on a map, and assess all of the details that are presented in summary. And if they choose to invest, so this is the difference, an investor has the choice to invest in that project for that given return.
Yes.
And so in making that choice, they are determining the relationship that they have with the borrower. And that's quite important. It brings us back to the question of intent that I made earlier. And so they select how much they want to invest. And it's available there for investors to invest anything from £1,000 up to several million if they choose. Yes. And we get to the point where investors will then just creep through the investment allocation, and if there's any shortfall, then we have investors that can just sweep up the rest.
Yes.
And so alhamdulillah, to date we've had all facilities and financings completed without issue.
Alhamdulillah. So that means, when you've set the 5 days to completion, you are confident that you'll raise the money.
Always.
So even if the money isn't raised from the
crowd,
we
already have
you've got that. You can fill that the gap. And so the crowd we're talking about, are these people that are very experienced, sophisticated people, or are they kind of ordinary individuals?
So it's very interesting. There's a range. So we have anyone from university students,
yes,
all the way through to extremely experienced property investors that have exited the market that
yes,
dabble now with through Nesta.
Yes.
Very wide range of customer profiles, alhamdulillah. We'd like to grow that. Obviously, there's an opportunity to grow that and see more come through.
Sure.
But for what we've done, as I said, 3 years and reaching that 35 million trigger is quite an achievement. So alhamdulillah.
You'll see there'll be some people that are skeptical about how Sharia compliant something is, for example. So what's available for people to see and make their own minds up of?
I would suggest this is a very, very difficult area, and one that should not be tackled by anyone that does not have the capacity to speak on this. And I will openly say I do not have the capacity to speak to that degree in respect of how Sharia compliant something is. What I will say is that everyone has, and look, alhamdulillah, we are a religion of knowledge, and so everyone has the ability to seek knowledge.
Yes.
And so research.
Yes.
We have published fatwa on our platform from very prominent muftis and shuyukh. We've explained the structure. I think every individual has the ability to afford themselves some time, especially if they're really considering engaging in a transactions such as this, to research the research our structure, research other structures, and see where they find comfort.
Yes.
And inshallah, they can see the work that we've done and the direction of travel that we're aiming to go in, and feel comfortable with that.
Yes.
And you know, there will be others that are cynical, and I understand that.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Personally, I'm of the opinion that institutions like these and organizations need to be supported in order for them to grow and develop. If everybody takes a very pessimistic view, then there is not going to be any Islamic finance that exists.
Correct.
If the uptake isn't there.
Correct.
So we have to support these organizations the best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's just think about the conversation we had earlier. So, you know, in order for us to make changes to UK law that are required for us to deliver this product,
yes,
we needed to lobby government. And we lobbied government with not just Nesta, but also the voices of many of the other players in the marketplace.
Yes.
If Islamic finance and the level of demand was so strong, that lobbying had come from you know, from the population, as opposed to just from the businesses, because there was demand, we'd be able to do more.
Yes.
And so you're absolutely right. There needs to be support, but we're doing as much as we can. You know, we're pushing as hard as we can. Inshallah, we're hoping for that momentum to grow such that we get to the point where that's the case.
Yes. And many of these organizations are their infancy when you compare to how long banking and such and financial institutions have been around in this country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you said, we're tiny in comparison to what exists, and trying to grow that. So supporting that is important.
Absolutely. Like I said, we're tadpoles, you know, but we have a voice. I think we need to capitalize on that as much as possible. And my point was that, you know, everyone should join in capitalizing on that as much as possible.
Yes.
Jump on the bandwagon. We need as many people on it as possible.
Yes.
And continue driving that change, inshallah.
So before we start wrapping up, what do you see as some of the innovations and new ideas and concepts in this space that will probably come along in the next few years?
Very interested to see what Hussain does.
Yes, he'll be on very soon.
Okay, fantastic. I'm really glad.
Yes.
So very interested to see what he does, because Harris is a real innovator.
Yes.
And what he's already created with Cordoba is quite interesting. And yeah, that'll be very interesting. I think FIDA have a great model.
Yes.
They have a great model. That if they can unlock their liquidity constraint, then I think they'll fly. And inshallah, they're doing some great work. I think they have some good news for us soon.
Inshallah. They'll also be on as well, inshallah.
Yeah, they're doing some great stuff. So, and there are others, you know, like there's still businesses that are trying to push in different directions. You know, Kestrel and Arib, mashallah, is always out there and doing great things. It'll be interesting to see what Wahid does. Wahid is a bit of a ship, you know, a big ship that moves maybe a little slower than some
because of its size.
Yeah, because of its size. But you know, they'll hopefully still be pushing. I mean, I like the fact that they brought out the real estate product.
Yes.
That was interesting. It's nice to see more being done, you know, because it just means that people have more options, and Islamic finance continues to be an area that people are interested in, as opposed to an area that is stagnant or stale.
Yes.
You know, I think we're just trying to give it some energy.
Yeah, and I think in the last few years, the technology has really enabled the growth of many of these organizations.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. What's the best way for people to reach out to you, connect with you if they want to follow
Good
this
question.
podcast?
So info@nesta.com is probably the easiest. So yes, at least that's monitored by a few of us.
Yes.
So info@nesta.com.
And the website for general information, nesta.com.
Yeah, nesta.com.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much for
very
coming up.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.